Hey guys, it's Andrew here, back with another TouchDesigner tutorial. Um, Today we're gonna be making this blobby thing. This is also known as metaballs, or if you're my phone's autocorrect, meatball. They're pretty easy to make, and so this is a pretty beginner-friendly tutorial. So if you're looking for a place to start TouchDesigner, you're in the right place. This will be a really fast tutorial, and hopefully it will get you guys started on understanding how a simple network can actually make really cool effects. But yeah, let's get started. Okay, so to start, what we're gonna do is we're gonna right-click everything to delete it. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna close this palette so we have more space by doing Control B. Then I'm either going to double click or press tab to navigate to my tops menu. And we're going to search up constant. From there, you can either press this I or we can middle click, but I want you to focus on the pixels and then the format. We're going to be changing these. We're going to go into our comment tab and we're going to first change our resolution to be 10 by 10. And then we're also going to go into our pixel format and use 32-bit float RG. Now when we middle click, you'll see that we have 100 pixels, which is basically 100 blobs, and then 32-bit float RG, which means that we're kind of only going to be doing things in the X channel or the X axis and the Y axis. So now we can go back into our constant and we're just going to change our color to be 0 and then 0. And you'll notice here that even though this is blue, this is black because we're not using this blue channel. Now what we can do is we can click on this notch right here and we get this wire and we're going to press tab again and get a null. From there, I'm going to rename this as positions or POS, and I'm going to quickly create my instancing chain. So we're going to go into our softs and we're going to grab a circle, and then we're going to chain a transform, and then we're going to chain a null. This transform we can change to have a uniform scale of 0.1. And from there, what we want to do is we want to grab the wire, go into our comp, and then grab our geometry. Make sure there's a wire. If there isn't, then this isn't going to chain. From there, we're also going to grab a camera. And we're also going to go into our yellow tab and grab a constant material. And we can apply this by just dragging it onto the geo and clicking on the material, like so. Next thing that we're going to go is we're going to grab a render top, like so. And in my common tab, I'm going to change this to be 1080 by 1080 with a pixel format of 32-bit float RGBA. From there, I'm going to grab a null. And I'm also going to, in between this, insert a operator, which will be our transform. And I'm going to go into my background color. I'm going to change that to be the alpha to be 1. And then I'm going to turn this on. And then I'm going to call this BG and turn this display on. Now I don't want this to be in my background. So what I can do is I can split this pane right here. And I can go into the pane type on the right-hand side and change that to be top viewer. Then I'm going to sort of make that smaller. And now we don't need this one. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to turn off backdrop tops. And there we go. So now what we can do, our last little step is we're going to go into our geometry and we're going to go into our instance tab and we're going to turn on instancing. Then what we can do is we can grab this position right here and we're going to put that into our translate operator. And we're just going to type in R, G, and B. Like so. Nothing's changed, which is fine, But now we can do things and we'll be able to see everything change on the right-hand side. Okay, so even though we have only this 1 point right here, technically it's 100 points stacked on top of each other. And so what we can do is I'm going to move this constant over here so we have a bit more room. And then I'm going to grab a noise. And one thing to note right now is you'll see that this right here has a pixel amount of 100 and the format is 32-bit float RG. This one is completely different. And one way to make sure, we want these to be the same, and one way we can make sure that they're the same is we can go into the comment tab again and repeat the process that we did at the beginning, but that takes a while. So what I like to do is I just like to chain this like so. And now when we click on the middle, you'll see that this is the same as this, which is good. This is what we want. Now, if we go into our noise, we're going to change our period to be 0.05 and our offset to be 0 and our monochrome to be off. Then in our output tab, I'm going to just do noise. From there, I'm going to I'm going to insert a add in between my constant and my position. And I want my noise to go into the second input like so. And so if we go into our noise, you'll see that if we change our amplitude, we either keep them at the beginning or we can make them spread out, which is great because now we kind of have an emitter, but everything's in sync. So it's kind of like you either have no points or a bunch of them. And so what we kind of want is like this like randomness to it. And the way that we can do that is, okay, I'm going to set this just back to be 0.5. But I'm going to grab another noise. And again, make sure it's chained. And this one, we don't need it to be we're going to make a timer out of this. So we're going to change this to be 32-bit float mono, like so. And I'm going to just change the offset here to be abs time.seconds, like so. And then in my output, I just want this to be noise. From there, what I want to do is I want to grab a limit, like so. And I want this to be going from 0 to 1. Right now, if I click on this viewer active and press D, you'll see that the values are like really high. It's like, yeah, it's 3,000, almost 4,000. And if we were to multiply anything with this, it would kind of go off to infinity. So what we're going to do is we're going to limit the type with loop. And we're going to just change this to be minimum 0, maximum 1. And now, if we click on that viewer active again, you'll see that all of these go in between 0 and 1. Now what we want to do is we want to chain a multiply from our limit. And we want our noise 1 to go again into our second input, like so. And now what we can do is I'm going to move this add a bit over here. And we can replace this multiply wire right here. And now we have this lovely little emitter. Okay, so now that we have our circles emitting outwards, I also want to change the scale of each of the circles. And we can do that by basically grabbing values that are random between 0 and 1. And we do that by chaining a noise. And we're going to change this type to be random. We're going to keep the amplitude and the offset to be 0.5. And we're going to change our RGB to be noise, and then our pixel format to be 32-bit float mono. From there, what we can do is we can grab a limit. And since this is giving us values between 0 and 1, we don't want our values to be too small. It could give us something like 0.01, and that means that we're changing our circle to be basically a tiny, tiny point. And that's not going to look good. So I'm going to limit this with a clamp. And I'm just going to change this to be 0.4. And then this one to be 0.9, like so. From there, I can grab a scale, I can grab a null. And I can put this to be scale, like so. And from there, I'm going to drag that underneath my position. And I'm going to click on my geo, and I'm going to change the scale to be R and G. Okay. And yeah, Now we have different sizes. This is looking a bit small though, so I'm actually going to go into my camera and yeah, I'm gonna click on my view and I'm going to change this projection to be orthographic, like so. And yeah, that should be good. Much, much better. So now that we have this system set up, we can start making this blobby. Okay, so to make this blobby, it's actually really straightforward. I'm just gonna insert a math. I'm gonna multiply this by 2 in the multi-add. Then I'm gonna grab a blur and I'm going to change this to be a Gaussian blur. And I'm going to change the pre-shrink to be 3 and the filter size to be 32, like so. And look at that. Now it's like kind of hazy, so we can get rid of that by adding a level. And with this level, I want my contrast to be 5 and my gamma to be 0.25, I believe. Yeah, should be good. And then what we want to do is we want to limit this with a clamp. And we just want this to be between 0 and 1. And there we go. So now there's a bit of things that I do want to tweak because a few things I don't like. Number one is it's kind of jolty in the center. And then also these circles kind of, they just like pop out of existence. And I kind of want them to sort of shrink instead. So to get this shrinking effect, we need to think about what happens when the blobs are moving outwards. And right now, when they're moving outwards, our scale over here is static. So no matter where it is, it's always going to be the same size. So we want to think about this as the further it goes out, the smaller it gets. And luckily, we have this limit right here, which kind of acts like a timer. And right now, it's affecting the position in a logic where it's like the brighter this white pixel is, the further out one of my blobs is going. And so we can actually grab a level and we can inverse this effect. And now we can use this to say the further something is going outwards, the less it is. And we can apply that to our limit right here, our limit 2. And we can replace this as our scale, like so. And now we have this tiny blob that's spitting things, and you can see it's getting smaller. Now, one thing though is that this is kind of small. So we can go back into our camera and we can change our ortho widths to be 1. And so we can actually get a better look at this if we just look at the render, and we'll see that all of the circles are shrinking the further we go out. Now though, we want to also ease the scaling because I want to sort of make it less jolty. Right now you don't really see anything because the noise is fixed, but we can animate this noise afterwards. And yeah, so what I'm going to do to ease the scale is I'm going to add a null here, and I'm just going to call this to chop, like so. And then I'm going to grab a wire, I'm going to go into my chop, and then I'm going to do top 2. And then I'm going to turn off my viewer. I'm going to output as a single channel set, and then in my crop, I'm going to do full image. Then I'm going to grab a lag. And this lag, I'm also going to turn off the viewer, and I'm also going to do lag per sample. And then I'm going to grab a null, like so, turn the viewer off as well. And then I'm going to change this to be to top, like so. And then we're going to grab a chop 2, so. And I'm going to do RGBA and then fit to square. And then we can replace this with this. And again, nothing really changes because this was already not very jolty. But now what we can do is we can go into this noise and we can animate it by going to the transform tab. And we can just do abs time dot seconds. And then I'm going to do 0.02. And so now we have a bit of fun movement. I think the next thing that we can do is we can add a bit of color to our blobs if we would like. And we can just do this by getting another noise. And with this noise, I want monochrome off. I want my period to be 2, my offset to be 1. And I also want to go into my comment tab and I want to do RGBA. And I'm going to just change this noise. And we're going to grab a null and we're going to name this COL for color. And what I can do is I can go into my geo and I can go into my second instancing tab. And then there's a color mode right here. And I can just do RGB like so. And yeah, that's essentially our entire visual. The last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse this all into a single base so that we can customize it. So just right click all of it except for this BG. And I'm going to right click anywhere on my network and do collapse selected like so. Now I'm going to call this Blobby. And I'm going to right click it and I'm going to open up 2 things. First one being the customized component. And I'm just going to put that over my face. And then the other thing, which is the parameters, which I'm just going to put right here. Like so. And oh, if this doesn't show up, it's probably because I could press P. So you can press P to turn this off if you want more room. But I'm going to keep it on like so. Anyways, the next thing that we can do is we can go into our patch and we can start to customize it. So in our constant, our first constant right here, we have our resolution, and that resolution is essentially setting our amount of points. And so what we can do is we can actually just drag this right here, and we can bind it as a master. And now what happens is you can see that in our common tab, there's a new parameter right here. And what we can do is we can name this maybe something like points. And now you'll see that if I change this like so, well, now we have 2 times 2, which is 4. And we can do something like 20 times 20. And now we have 400, which is super great. We don't have to go into our comp. The next thing that I want to do is maybe, let's go and grab this offset right here. This offset is driving our timer. So what I can do is I can actually just move that into my parameters and I can bind that as a new master. Now the thing is now that that's happened, you can see that it stopped animating. And that's because it's taking a, I guess it's taking the value that's here now. And so I can set this to be something like timer speed. So, and I can just do add time, seconds. Yeah. And now we're back to normal. Aside from that, maybe we want to also change the noise. Let's see. We could do something like, yeah. So another thing that we could do is we could find our amplitude of this noise right here in our noise 4. And we could call this blob color. Or like blob color intensity. And this one, we could turn it down to 0 to get white. And we turn it up to get a bunch of color, like so. And we probably want to change this as well. So blob color intensity. The U. There we go. Aside from that, what else we could do? Well, if we look into our network, another thing is maybe, well, let me turn this off real quick. Could look into the split. And this blur, we could add if we sort of change this pre-shrink, you'll see that we can get an intensity of how blobby our blobs are. And yeah, let's go into this one, and we can bind this one, and we can name this one Blobby intensity. And yeah, that's all that I really had in mind to customize. But you can really, decide for yourself what you want to maybe do or not do. You could go into like the seed and drag this down. It really is up to you. And the great thing is, well, if we close all of this, we can step back outside and the parameters are here for you to play with. So with this fully parameterized project, now let's say that we're playing around with it and we've gotten something that we really, really enjoy. How do we save it and how do we share it? Well, the way that we can do that is with a movie file out. And with this movie file out, we have an option to take a movie or we can take an image. If we're doing a movie, I like to do a MP4, but this is for PC and my PC specifically. Depending on what you use, it'll be different. I think Mac uses an Apple ProRes, but try to figure that out. I think there's probably documentation on the TouchDesigner website. And to sort of do any sort of saving, you want to change the file name. So I'm just call this Blobby. And we can also change the index. And this is so that, we can do multiple versions of something with the same name. Down here, we can limit the length, which I like to do. And I usually put that into seconds. I'll do like 10 seconds or like 5 seconds. And then once you record, you'll see that it sort of shows this happening like here. And yeah, this will end up being in our Blobby project file folder. And so wherever you're saving your project file, when you use a movie file out, the video will always also be there. I did this earlier, and so I renamed it. And one thing to be wary about is, yeah, you want to, usually a good practice, at least for me, is I like to rename these, whatever it is, but I like to rename it so that it doesn't match up with my actual project saving convention. And the reason why is because now that I have this renamed, if I press undo, it will undo the movie file out record. And so now I get a new Blobby. And so if I'm rename it, then nothing gets overwritten. Well, that's basically the tutorial, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. If you are new to TouchDesigner, I hope this was easy to follow along and that you learned something. And I hope that this helps you pursue more TouchDesigner tutorials in the future. If you do like my art and what I teach, consider supporting me on Patreon. There, I upload all of my tutorial files as well as special variations on those tutorials where there's just more customization or it's like a version from my Instagram. For this project, I'll be also including a bit of a audio reactive system that's pretty simple, but it's still a really cool effect. I wanted to include it in this tutorial, but it made it a lot longer than I wanted it to be for some reason. So yeah, come check out my Patreon. Aside from that, like, comment, subscribe, the whole shebang. If you have any feedback or any suggestions, please let me know. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Okay, bye.